Alright guys, let's kick things off with sparse coding. Now, this isn't your grandma's coding. This is about how our brains, and increasingly, AI, handle massive amounts of sensory data. Think of it like this. Your eyes are bombarded with tons of visual information every second, but your brain doesn't process every single detail. Instead, it focuses on the important stuff, the stuff that really matters for understanding the world. Sparse coding is a way of representing this process mathematically, where only the key features, the essential components, are kept while a lot of irrelevant data are discarded. This helps to reduce computational demands and increase the efficiency of information transmission. Think of it like a digital masterpiece. We aren't looking at every pixel when we are looking at a painting, but rather the combination of colors and shapes that compose and tell the story behind the artwork. It's been incredibly successful in predicting how the visual and auditory systems in mammals might operate by taking into account the statistics of the data they receive from the environment. A recent study even compared the similarities and differences in terms of sparseness between the way we process images and sounds by using a sparse coding model trained on both images and audio. The results are fascinating. While both image patches and speech spectrograms admit these sparse representations, the structure is quite distinct between human speech sounds and corresponding natural image patches. It turns out that the sparseness distributions are much more uniform for images, whereas those for audio spectrograms display a wider range and often asymmetry. Now, there are some nuances here, and their meanings are highly relevant to designing biologically plausible machine learning algorithms. For instance, the authors found that a biologically driven coding architecture trained on speech data ended up producing models much different than our current state-of-the-art algorithm, indicating that a closer model that mimics how the brain works may capture different structural parts of the data. It also opens up a massive amount of new research investigating how we should build models with such constraints and what biological implications may be for auditory models, suggesting that modeling auditory processing may demand special adaptations in algorithms even while employing the same basic sparse coding principles as those in visual processing. It's a testament to the sheer complexity and nuance of neural coding and how much more we have yet to discover. Now, let's switch gears and talk about something equally mind-blowing: Anthropic's work on large language models, LLMs, and how they use sparse autoencoders to understand them better. LLMs are these incredibly powerful AI systems that can generate human-quality text, translate languages, answer questions, and so much more. But here's the thing. They're incredibly complex, kind of like a black box. These LLMs use an overwhelming number of trained weights, and you don't exactly know what each weight does or its impact on the network's decision-making process. Even the researchers who train them struggle sometimes to explain what's happening inside. This is what makes mechanistic interpretability such a compelling and important field. Its core approach is attempting to understand these large models. This is important because we cannot ensure these models are aligned with our wants, i.e., will perform predictably and correctly as we'd want, unless we understand what exactly they do. Anthropic employs a very promising tool that employs a fascinating technique known as sparse autoencoders to get a deeper insight into these LLM models. Think of sparse autoencoders as a sophisticated microscope that lets us peer inside the language model and view the underlying processes. These autoencoders work by taking the model's activations, which are the values associated with each neuron during processing, and decomposing them into smaller, easier-to-interpret components called features. These features are found without any external guidance of which features the model should uncover and are therefore discovered without any explicit bias from the researchers. These are then investigated to observe patterns in the features for different contexts and thereby allow for better understanding of what the LLM does. Now, the brilliance here is not simply the use of sparse autoencoders itself, but specifically Anthropic's approach to scaling them and incorporating state-of-the-art computational architectures. You have to remember that the output of each layer in a large language model needs to be processed, and with more parameters, the number of these computations needed for understanding increases exponentially. Scaling it up to thousands of layers is a major engineering feat, allowing researchers to trace the development of these features within the network. They named this collection of autoencoders as Gemiscope, an impressive collection of over 400 autoencoders providing insights into features derived from two of Anthropic's open language models. This is truly a monumental effort with broad implications for AI safety and alignment. This incredible amount of research shows just how critically important this area of mechanistic interpretability is and just how much this new approach may lead the field in the near future. Let's shift gears now and delve into a fascinating new principle in the field of neuroscience, maximal dependence capturing, MDC. This principle offers a powerful alternative view to the prevailing ideas about how our brains process sensory information, particularly when it comes to something as complex as object recognition. The traditional framework argues that our brains decompose incoming sensory information into many smaller and independent features which are then assembled in a hierarchical manner across numerous layers of neural processing. In this setting, maximizing efficiency is closely related to the minimization of redundancy in transmitting data, the efficient coding hypothesis. Now, there are many problems with this theory. One aspect is that a factorial code derived from an independent component decomposition of visual data is not sufficient for creating invariants to various visual cues. Visual attributes such as position, scale, and rotational angle are all entangled, i.e., cannot be individually defined, yet their effect can easily be separated during object recognition in humans and various other animals. Moreover, this framework requires all variations of object forms to be used in training the network. Such a training task is extremely computationally intensive and, as noted by this research, creates an issue of how to represent and distinguish between object attributes like pose, orientation, and scale. Object representations that are insensitive to these however, as we see in many animals with limited brain complexity, such an advanced hierarchy of layers is not available or required for object recognition. This is a key problem when using artificial intelligence to emulate the brain's ability to recognize objects. The authors propose a different way of looking at object recognition. They focus on maximizing the mutual information between a neuron's response and a specific concept. This assumes that an object is not just a combination of features, it is about their interrelationship. Some visual cues provide more information than others when it comes to identifying objects. The model assumes that when an object is encoded by a certain neuron, it may use various combinations of features that result in minimizing uncertainty regarding its identity. Such features, therefore, capture the maximal dependence between the object and its representation. This is the principle of maximal dependence capturing, MDC. This is based on a very simple idea of optimizing and untangling visual representations in a higher dimensional space using the blessing of dimensionality. These higher dimensional spaces allow for object representations that are sparse and thereby distinguish between objects. Unlike the traditional hierarchical networks that depend on complex feature combinations and many layers, we may achieve object recognition with a high level of accuracy with a very simple two-layer network. Thus, our simple model doesn't require complex feature combinations or many layers of processing. The simulations they performed with the MDC-based framework demonstrated that not only the model is robust without large training sets or complex hierarchies, it is also uniquely able to reproduce classical cell tuning phenomena not captured by other models. It gives a great account for simple cell-like localized receptive fields, while also accounting for the more complex and often orientation-selective tuning observed in other neurons. This is further reinforced by their simulation, which showed that the tuning properties of neurons in this simple framework could transform from highly complex to localized as more and more images were used in training. The framework is thus uniquely consistent with observations made across several visual cortical areas. This new, powerful principle has the potential to unlock a deeper understanding of object recognition and many other sensory processing challenges. And finally, let's wrap things up with a discussion of efficient coding. Efficient coding, or efficient representation, is a cornerstone of neuroscience as it seeks to explain how the brain processes information efficiently using limited computational resources. It's about how neural circuits are designed and adapted to extract the maximum amount of behaviorally relevant information from the environment. This idea touches on many aspects of the brain's architecture and function, one of these aspects being how the retina codes color. It turns out that the number of each cone type appears to be optimized for the actual spectral characteristics of natural light. Another excellent example is the structure of receptive fields in the retina and in V1. These are shaped to be most effective at processing the spatial structure and correlations found in natural scenes. This helps to maximize the information transferred about changes in luminance or other visual cues. A recent study on efficient coding focuses on adapting to the statistics of visual textures, which relies on the processing of visual information that occurs in areas V2 and above. Here, they found that human and rat texture perception is well adapted to the multipoint statistics present in nature through a force-choice task. This emphasizes how the structure of human and even rat visual cortex is deeply entwined with and adapted to the statistical structure of the world around us. Going beyond this, other areas of the brain have been studied in this context as well. This can be the auditory cortex, where it was shown that contrast gain control leads to better performance in detecting signals, or in the entorhinal cortex where the grid system is implicated in efficiently processing information related to environmental location. A very interesting avenue being explored is whether this principle extends all the way to high-level operations such as object recognition and, most importantly, to how the hierarchical structures of the visual system enable this. Recent work highlights that this could be achieved through spatiotemporally efficient coding, minimizing the energy to perform tasks as well as the temporal differences in neural responses while maximizing the entropy in neural representations in different areas of the brain. In such a processing framework, neural responses are made to dynamically change smoothly in response to changes in the observed visual stimulus. The model is able to naturally produce several well-known facts regarding visual processing. These facts include how different responses occur to unlearned inputs, deviant responses, higher sensitivity for the horizontal and vertical spatial axes, and a hierarchical representation of information with high-order properties of textures being most effectively encoded in higher visual areas, all in a single model. This offers a unified principle describing how visual information is transformed and processed, with a particular emphasis on the roles played by bottom-up and feedback pathways in both inference and learning. So, for all the researchers doing great works in the field, remember to consider efficient coding from a broader viewpoint, accounting for resource limitations and behavioral goals. Combining normative efficient coding approaches, and then experimentally investigating them, with machine learning-based techniques that are able to learn from available data and test implications without resort to analytical derivations could be a particularly fruitful approach that could contribute significantly to the future of theoretical neuroscience.